Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Paranormal Karen, funny too. Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Oh, and did I mention she's funny too? Yeah, cha-cha-cha.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Paranormal Karen. It is March. It is, I think, the third week of March. And just a real quick housework for you guys. I am going to be in Chicago in June, April 5th. I'm going to be in Munster, Indiana. It's right next to Illinois. But email me if you want tickets. Some of you guys have emailed me, and I'll send you the link to where you can show up and support the show. And I just met some great people in Vegas, had blast in Vegas. But now, today, I am here with Christopher Balzano. Christopher, how are you?
Excellent, excellent. Are you talking about Muncie?
Is that it? No, it's right outside of, it's less than 40 minutes out of Chicago.
Yeah, I think that's Muncie, Illinois. I think there's actually a really interesting legend from there that we were going to follow up on our summer trip a few years ago. We never got to. So
not only am I excited about you telling that legend, but I think it's even fascinating that you know where my gig is and I don't.
Well, Muncie is somewhat famous. It must had to have been on some kind of television show too, or else it wouldn't have popped up on my radar.
Okay, so wonderful. Well, then let's get to the topic. First of all, my friend has a great podcast called Trippin' on Legends, and you are here to talk to us today about folklore, which I love, except I think that's such a big word. But before we even get to that, you're in Florida now. I thought you used to live in Boston, right?
Yep, I'm originally from Boston. I've been down in Florida, unfortunately, about 10 years now. And I have to honestly tell you, I love Massachusetts a lot more. So,
Florida is a tough state to love.
It is, and I'm not quite sure. It's some place that people have to pick. I feel like people were tired of Florida, or they've done something and they feel they've accomplished something in life, and so they go down to Florida. We went down to Florida because rent was so high in Boston, so it wasn't the most noblest of pursuits. But we're down here, and it's funny because I spent my first 5 years basically thinking there was nothing worth its salt down here paranormal wise, and in the last 4 I really started to discover that Florida is not as varied and as interesting as Massachusetts when it comes to its paranormal, but it's actually got a lot going on.
Yeah, Massachusetts, which I'm originally from Pittsfield, Mass, and I went to Fitchburg State, but Massachusetts has crazy. In fact, you had a book out that came with a DVD years ago, and what was the name of that book? In fact, that book is the only reason I know the difference between digital and analog.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I had 2 books that were like that. The one you're probably talking about is Picture Yourself Capturing Ghosts on Film, which is the worst book I've ever written. But feel free to go out and buy it. And then it was kind of like a dummies guide.
The dummies collection. Was the one I had. I think the dummies one, right? Or was that one dummies too?
No, this was like a more sleek dummy type of book ripoff. And it was Picture Yourself Ghost Hunting and then Picture Yourself Capturing Ghosts on Film.
And you guys went into an old house in Boston, and that was on the DVD, right?
Mm-hmm.
It may have been terrible, but I very much enjoyed it. So I would recommend people take a look at it anyways. So
thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's the ghost hunting one is a book I'm much more proud of, and groups used it as like their textbook for a while, which was really impressive, and I got a lot of pride out of that. But Picture Yourself Capturing Ghosts on Film is kind of it's a little bit sketchy. It's actually one of the reasons why I shifted from investigating into legend tripping was I spent however many pages, 300 pages of that book, 7,000 pictures of ghosts, and I still can't tell you what's a real ghost and what's not. And I, literally wrote the book on it. And so it got to a point where I was like, you know what? We're so consumed with evidence, we're not looking at the bigger picture. And so after taking a step back from it for a while, I got back into it. to do legend tripping instead and to explore kind of the folklore and also experience the hauntings rather than trying to capture some kind of lightning in a bottle.
I am so with you on that because you know what, too? Now with the internet, anything could be faked.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter. People send me their pictures all the time. And even one where I can't pick out a shadow or something I can't kind of debunk, I'm still like, only you were there. Only you know,
right.
So it did get tough. But you know what, too? That's the part you're talking about is the part I love where it's almost like being in a scary movie or you get the feeling, you get the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And, but I have to say, you went into a house in Boston. I think this was on that thing where you literally got an EVP walking in. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And someone
it was in Salem, Massachusetts, actually.
Oh, and someone said they're taping us.
Oh no! Oh, you're talking about the Samuel West House.
Yes,
that was in Freetown, which is another subject of one of my books, two of my books, the Bridge Ghost of the Bridgewater Triangle in Dark Woods. But we went into this house that has to be one of the most active EVP houses that I've ever seen in my life. We literally, the first time we went there, I went there with Matt Moniz. From Spooky South Coast. And we were walking up the stairs and we had the tape recorder on. And I said, do you know us? Do you recognize us? And at that time I was teaching at the school. I was running a ghost hunting class and the EVP was so loud that a room full of 16 and 17-year-old hormonal listeners with no equipment and no training were like, what'd they just say? I mean, they could hear it that loud. It went, Matthew. Wow. On that DVD, we actually capture Matt and I are talking. This is actually a different one altogether. We're talking and all of our equipment gets sapped of energy. And as we're talking about it in the background, you hear a guy yelling about an airplane and the airplane's going down. And then we found out that an airplane had gone down about a block away from there about 50 years before that. Wow. And then we set up all of this equipment in there. I know I just went on this whole spiel about how much I don't like evidence, and now I'm going off on evidence.
But this house
is fun really
evidence.
Crazy.
This is good evidence.
And we were in that house, and we let the tape recorders play, record for about an hour. We went outside. We were talking to the homeowners. The stuff we got inside that house was incredible. We caught conversations where it seemed that a more experienced spirit was trying to tell a newer spirit kind of the rules of the game. Things like don't talk, they're recording us. You have something that said, what's this? And they went, that's the tape recorder, get away from it. Things like this. It was really, really crazy. And they seemed to be interactive, and it seemed to be levels. The reason why we had originally gone in there was an older woman in the house. We got her yelling at kids that didn't exist. But then we also got, because it used to be a funeral home, right? So that adds to the eeriness of it. Mm-hmm. It's right on. It abuts the property of a retirement home that has a lot of people who pass away. And so we felt that this was really kind of like an entranceway, like a passing through gate, like people on their way from life to whatever lies after it. We're stopping by and meeting with each other there. And so we got all these voices overlapping, talking to each other. And like I said, warning that don't talk. And they even used the word EVP at one point. So they were very knowledgeable ghosts.
Now that's fascinating to me. And I've never heard anything like, and that was a private residence, or was it that house you just said, the Samuel house?
Samuel West House, but that is a private residence.
Oh, okay. Because the whole idea of one spirit training another just leads to 1,000 questions in my mind.
Exactly, yeah. And it was one of those things where rather than the evidence supporting ghosts or not supporting ghosts, you're going to believe or you're not going to believe. Instead, it gave like a little glimpse of what might be going on the other side and how we might have a relationship with ghosts, and ghosts have a relationship with each other. And so, it was really interesting. And eventually, I'm pretty sure for a while, people were doing like ghost tours of it. And it's a house. It's not like a big building. That's a 2-family residence. They kicked the people on the second floor out because they were kind of wacky. And and people were having tours of it. And people were paying to ghost hunt there for the night. So, for a while, it had a little flare up.
Yeah, that must have made it a horrible place to sleep, though. If there were, isn't that rule 1? Don't ghost hunt in your own apartment or your own place?
Well, they're divorced now, so there you go. And all the kids are kind of...
what's funny? Even the newer spirit that either you wonder, did that spirit not know what a tape recorder was? Is it from before tape recorders, or what does it look like on the other side? Now, I'm going to be obsessed with that now. We're only 2 minutes into this. I'm already obsessed. All right, but legends. So tell me, you kind of told us how you got into it. Tell me a little bit more and how your travels. And I believe you do this with your wife, is it?
Oh no, she's just my partner.
Oh, okay. I didn't mean to force a commitment on anyone.
No, that's
I'm just
okay.
kidding.
That's okay. It's kind of I guess I can't say too much because it's kind of a running gag on the show whether or not we're together.
Oh, okay. I can cut that off.
So people kind of are they boyfriend or girlfriend? Are they husband and wife? We are definitely not married. I can tell you that.
Okay, then I'll leave
her
the
name's
rest.
Natalie, and she is the researcher. She is the one that asked the question. She's the one who is inexperienced. She had no training or anything like that going into it. So she asks the questions that the audience asks, that the audience wants to know, things that I wouldn't think of because I've been doing this for so long. And she looks really good on camera too. So there's always that. But we wanted to experience these hauntings in Florida. So if there's there's supposedly a ghost here, or this hotel is haunted, or chances are we're not going to make it there. But what we do is we find these more obscure legends in Florida that the community themselves are talking about. They're telling the story. It maybe has leaked out onto the internet, and we go there, and what we do is we try to experience the haunting and usually try to do something to trigger it. I'll give you a great example. So one of the ones we're planning coming up is this place outside of Orlando slightly. Everything's outside of Orlando because that's how you have to measure Florida. And so on this bridge, supposedly, a man wanted to buy a love potion from a local witch. And when he found out that the local witch, her price was his firstborn son, very Rumpelstiltskin.
Wow.
He tossed her from the bridge, killing her, impaling her on the cypress, and then weighing her down and letting her fall into the swamp. And it's said that her ghost is still making its way to that bridge, right? And other people have reported seeing a man and his son there. So now we're thinking, oh, wait a minute. Does his spirit get trapped there too somehow? So it's a really great story. And like most of them, we can't corroborate any of the information in it. But what we're going to do is we're going to go to that bridge. We're going to play Love Potion number 9 as we're doing it. We're going to we've looked up and did some research on some of the most disgusting or inappropriate love potions, and what we're going to do is kind of take those and spill them out on the bridge, gangster style, and see if we can get the spirits to communicate with us, or see if we can kind of touch the legend. And that's kind of an extreme example.
Oh, I love
but that's
it, though.
the kind of thing that we do. It's for a long time in the days of cross-armed, black T-shirt, sunglass wearing ghost hunters, the fun part was lost.
Yes.
And the paranormal can be fun, and the paranormal can be about adrenaline and about challenging yourself as long as you're respectful. And Tripping on Legends is trying to kind of bring that back.
I love that. And because I do the little 1 minute paranormal Karens. That
amazing.
Jokes. Thank you. And it was so funny because out here in Hollywood, everyone's like, paranormal people don't want to laugh. And I was like, well, you're wrong about that. And it's such an untapped thing. I love this. What if you get an EVP of that woman correcting you? Like, don't use that potion, use another one.
Or a recipe. Yeah. And you know what? The weird thing is that, and I know I gave the whole thing, the spiel about the Sam West house and the EVPs there, which were actually gotten by someone else. Going out there not looking for evidence, we've gotten some of the best evidence I've gotten in the 25, 30 years I've been doing this.
Oh, I agree. I did, everybody knows, I think it was 2 weeks ago, or a couple weeks ago, I did a paranormal, Karen, and someone on YouTube, it was from, the Washaw Club in Virginia City. And someone said, does anyone else here, at 29 seconds hear someone say, kill her? And it was so clear. And I thought, of all the work you do, it's the one that just off the cuff, somebody's trying to kill you.
Right.
Oh, that's great. And so do you guys go all over the country, or that's eventually what it's going to be? Or where do you find it?
The original inspiration for it I came up with a few years ago, and I was thinking, like, if I could go back before I had a family and before I had a wife and before I had kids, I had a wife before I had all that stuff. Like, I wish I could go across the country and spend like 3 days in these weird towns in all across the country and capture, one legend from each place. And that was kind of the inspiration for this. We've spent the majority of our times, the last 3 years almost, in Florida. We did a road trip where we hit North Carolina and then up into Indiana because I wanted to visit. I don't know if I should introduce this word into our conversation, but I wanted to visit the other major Pukwudgie location in the United States.
Now, wait, I'm not familiar with Pukwudgie, but now you're already telling me there's two?
There are many Pukwudgie locations.
Okay.
All throughout the world, I would say.
Okay.
So a Pukwudgie, and the odd thing is you didn't know that. For a while, I was known as the Pukwudgie guy.
What's Pukwudgie?
Because I'm going to tell you, I got to get around to my own narrative way.
Okay. Just assume that I don't know anything. That's how my podcast works.
That's a good
best.
place to start. All right. So when I was doing research about things that were going on in the Freetown State Forest that I had mentioned before, I kept getting these reports of these small trolls. And people legitimately seeing these small creatures about 3 foot tall, look like a troll, covered in hair, elongated nose, stuck out belly, and they didn't know what it was. But what was happening is the first two that I recorded were very similar. One was in the woods, one was right outside the woods. They accidentally ran into these things. One of them, the dog went crazy. The other one was in a parking lot, like kind of a weird, out of the way parking lot leading into the forest, and saw one walking behind him in his rearview mirror. Both instances, they were completely freaked out. They kind of ran away, only for a few days later for these creatures to appear to them in their rooms.
Mm.
And as I was doing research for this, I came across a reference to the Dover Demon, which is a famous case in Massachusetts. And the book said, we can unequivocally say, it was Joe Citro from Vermont, we can unequivocally say that the Dover Demon is not a Pukwudgie. And I was like, well, what's a Pukwudgie? You're like, what? It sounds like you're saying, we can unequivocally say it's not a unicorn, and everyone knows that. And then he went on for about a paragraph about the Pukwudgies. And so what I did was I researched more, and the only reference to it was a kid's book called The Good Giant and the Bad Pukwudgies. That was literally the only reference to it on the internet. I got that book. That book had like a little thing. Thank you for the Narrow Lands for giving some of the legends that are in this story. Bought the Narrow Lands. Then all of a sudden, I was working as a librarian at the time. I had 27 books that had 1 or 2 mentions of this Pukwudgie, which is a paranormal creature all throughout New England. And I'm finding all throughout the country, if not beyond, that is a trickster. What it does is it lures people. At first, it just kind of like pulled little practical jokes on the Wampanoag, which were the local tribe there. And then all of a sudden, their creator god goes away on a date that he never comes back from. And the Pukwudgies use this opportunity to become violent and evil and angry and start burning villages and kidnapping children and leading people to their death. And eventually the creator god comes back and gets rid of them. But these creatures are seen all throughout New England. And people didn't necessarily have a name for them. So I've been documenting for the last 15 years about the story of this Pukwudgies. And now if you go on, there's a Pukwudgie beer. It's like one of the most famous cryptids. It's getting up there with, like Bigfoot and Mothman. And there's even actually a Pukwudgie is one of the 4 houses in the American Hogwarts. So J.K. Rowling had stolen my research and not given me a check for it. And so it's really this kind of story. And there's kind of like the Pukwudgie triad. It's the Pukwudgies, which are these creatures, and they can disappear, they can shapeshift. And then there are these bursts of light. We call them ghost lights or will-o'-the-wisp, and they're these visible orbs of light that people see, and those are the spirits of the people that they've killed. And then oftentimes there's a third thing seen, which is this dark figure, kind of like a more solid shadow person who seems to just be watching what's going on. And it's really interesting because if you go back into Wampanoag folklore, as they started to become Christianized through Plymouth Colony, you get that it goes from being called like the shadow or the watcher to the devil. And so it's this really interesting thing. Like there are a lot of areas that have these three elements, or at least two of these three elements kind of involved in the paranormal activity that's going on.
Okay. And before, I'm going to take a break now because I need to find out how they ended up in these people's rooms. So everyone hold on. Your nightmare is coming. Fierce, Funny, and Female has won over 10 book awards. And probably while I'm telling you this, it's winning 10 more. As one of the first women to work as a laborer in the Texas oil field, Marty McGibbon set off explosives and staked oil wells before realizing her childhood dream of becoming a successful stand-up comic. Marty introduces readers to a wide range of characters in her life, from sleazy authority figures and crazy Corn Belt cult leaders to Texas oil billionaires to wild-eyed redneck co-workers who robbed banks on their lunch hour. This is the second in Marty's series, and it is one of the most exciting stories. It's the story of a young woman's triumph over adversity and trauma, told with grace, wit, and laugh-out-loud humor. Look for Fierce, Funny, and Female on Amazon.com, author Marty McGibbon. Okay, so I have written down a whole ton of questions because that was so interesting. Okay. So, and so you said they were the Wampanoag, a part of the Wampanoag folklore. That was the tribe, correct?
Wampanoag or Wampanoag, yeah.
Okay.
Everyone's heard of the First Christmas and Squanto and stuff like that. Those were Wampanoags.
Okay. Now, so they kind of come in threes. Do people think this is a fairy or a elemental, or there's no category for it because it's
there really is no. Well, I wouldn't say it's necessarily obscure anymore, but it crosses so many categories. Like it really kind of blurs things. Initially, you want to say it's a cryptid, and yet, unlike theoretically, like other cryptids can disappear or are interdimensional somehow, these actually do disappear or turn into other things or turn into balls of light and float away. So they've kind of gotten more of an elemental feel to them than actually something solid. Although, like I said, people have although I personally don't know of any experience of anyone ever touching one, but definitely of falling into their traps, including me.
Yeah, they just sound sticky. When you say fall into their traps, what does that mean?
Well, one of the things, if you can remember, like Finding Nemo, mm-hmm. that part where the fish kind of had the glowing light and it lures you in, and then that's how it kills you.
Oh yeah.
These Pukwudgies have been known to use these lights to lure people into the woods, and then the people get lost and die, or the people like fall down ravines or something like that. They're kind of led to their death by being kind of they become almost like obsessed with these balls of light and follow them wherever they go. And that actually happened to me in New Hampshire at one point.
Wow, what was it, like something that paranormal? You saw the light and you were just kind of drawn to it, and you were like, I have to follow that.
Yeah, I mean, and it wasn't as like hypnotic as that. I was actually out on an investigation, although in retrospect, it was much more of a legend trip for my bachelor party. Actually, no strippers for me; it was Pukwudgies all the way. And this was kind of before I ever knew the term Pukwudgie, and it was this famous cemetery in Wilton, New Hampshire, which is the house of the home of the Blue Lady, who is this blue spirit. Supposedly she is disturbed because her husband buried his second wife, who had the same name as her, in the same grave to save money. And also another really interesting story about a man whose daughter was buried in the cemetery, but then when he died, her husband removed her body and put it in his family plot. He only had her there to satisfy the father while he was alive, and he roams the rows looking for his daughter, who's supposed to be there. But the other story that was coming out of there were of these, and this primarily came from Fiona Broome. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Fiona Broome.
You can give us go ahead and recap. Fiona
Broome, paranormal investigators, been doing it for years. She had a site called Hollow Hill. She's kind of also the originator of the Mandela effect.
Oh, okay, got it. Yes, I love that.
But anyway, so she said there are these angry Grovers that lie in there that attack people in this cemetery, and I'm like, excellent, we have to go because I want to be attacked by Grover. I found out later she didn't have kids, and so what she actually meant was Elmo. Because these were red-haired things. Oh. And so we're there, not thinking much strippers, and I start to see these little balls of light around the periphery, kind of near the woods. And I would go to like, oh, what is that? You're curious, you'd go out, and then all of a sudden it would appear 10 yards further into the woods. And then we went there, and then all of a sudden further into the woods, and then there'd be two of them. And, okay, maybe they're fireflies, maybe they're not fireflies, but these were obviously like balls of light that were like staying lit long enough to get our attention for us to start going over, and then they would fade and appear somewhere else. And eventually I'm like, we're pretty deep into the woods. It's New Hampshire, so you're going to be deep in the woods as soon as you get off the road.
Right.
But we were pretty deep in the woods. I'm like, any of you guys get the feeling we're getting lured out here to something? And of course, in the back of my mind with the whole attacks thing. So we decided to go back into the main part of the cemetery, and these lights kept happening, and they were almost getting like annoyed or frustrated with us for not following. And then eventually you would have thought it was WrestleMania or the Super Bowl. We were in the middle of the cemetery, and the whole forest was just alive with these poppings, pop, 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 like flash bulbs. There were so many of these orbs going off.
Wow.
And at that point, we left the cemetery.
Wow. Well, that's really interesting because, the whole thing, just the way it was trying to get you somewhere else and it wasn't comfortable in the cemetery. That's fascinating. So you said there were two times, correct?
Yeah. And then when I started doing this stuff and getting reports of things from Freetown and other places in Massachusetts in this area known as the Bridgewater Triangle, this woman had approached me and said she was walking her dog and she came across this thing that I've described, which we'll call a puckwudgie. And a few nights later, she was sleeping, and she was on the second floor of her house. She was sleeping, and she opened her eyes, and the puckwudgie was just kind of in the window, very Salem's Lot-ish. Just ahead, kind of giving her a look. And the way she described it, it was as if it was saying, you might know where I live, but I definitely know where you live.
Wow.
And so she never went into those woods again. And so that's the first story. And then the second story is very similar. Like I said, it was a man in his car, and he happened to see it in the rearview mirror in the parking lot next to the Freetown State Forest. And then a few days later, once again, only he was in his bedroom, and the puckwudgie was inside of the room, just kind of sitting down on one of the chairs, giving him, and he described it a different way. He described it as don't tell anyone about this. Don't ever go back to that parking lot. Like, he just got this like warning, this almost like stern. I'm a teacher, so I know the look he's talking about, that stern, like, don't you do that again kind of expression. And once again, he never went anywhere near the Freetown State Forest after that.
Wow. Now, do you think they look, you described them as like a troll, so they're not like a leprechaun, they're more like a troll.
See, the weird thing is that, like I said, we were going to Indiana to go to this other site. And what happened was, in doing that, it kind of connected all the dots. So this location in Indiana called Mound State Park, for a time was a meeting area for Native Americans all across the country. They went there to bury their most sacred of leaders, but also there was this connection and its alignment with the stars and the moon and those kinds of things, that this was a sacred place that people from all across the country came to. And the best I can understand it from having conversations with folklorists and archaeologists and anthropologists is that they didn't have a common language, right? And so some things were just kind of left unsaid, but puckwudgie became a term that they started to use to describe little monsters, right? It's the same way we might say monsters, and you go, oh, what kind of monster? Oh, it's a cookie monster, or it's a gremlin, or it's a... So this pukwudgie became a term for their small versions of their monsters. And what I found is that they are all throughout the Midwest. They're somewhat in the South. They're all up in Canada and, running from Massachusetts and New England through upstate New York and then kind of down into. So in that, what I have found, because this is the thing I couldn't rationalize in my mind. Why was Fiona Broom's Vale End Cemetery pukwudgie hairy with orange hair, red hair, and yet in Framingham, Massachusetts, I got one that looked like a gnome, like a garden gnome. And then ones in Freetown kind of had this, smoother skin with hair kind of in spots. And then this other pukwudgie kind of looked more. And so what I got was that people were calling these things pukwudgies, but it's really just a blanket term for all these little creepy crawlies that are all throughout the country.
Wow, it reminds me.
And beyond. Like, yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt you. You use the word leprechaun. I often have used the word leprechaun, not the nice one, but the creepy one, but not the movie creepy one, but the actual creepy one, as a way to describe them. So,
yeah, they sound right in that category, like a gnome or something like that. But that's, wow, now that's a new thing to look for. That's pretty creepy. So those are the two stories. Now, do you think that I had some friends, actually, I think Tommy. Tommy Durant. He's my friend. They had.
You're talking about in Florida, in California.
In California, yes. Him and a friend had a case of little leprechauns of someone that came over from England, but it doesn't sound like these came over from anywhere. They just sound like they were here.
You're talking about the one that he encountered in the cemetery?
I think it was in someone's house, and they had to actually get a puffer, and they had to find how the legend, like it took them forever to figure out the legend or something. They needed a puffer and something else to get rid of him.
It's hilarious you should say that, because Tom and I did an interview probably about 15 years ago where we talk about this exact subject.
Oh, funny.
So when you said his name, I started laughing because I'm like, oh my God. And that was really kind of one of the first times I was like, this is the story that I'm hearing out. I think that story begins in a cemetery, and they saw them in a cemetery, and then they saw them in another location. But yes, 100% what he was describing as a pukwudgie.
Wow. I wonder, it's funny because I think everything, I don't know, when people see things, it all kind of falls under that category of fairies or fae. Mm-hmm. But when you said trickster, trickster is that a different term? It's a term, I know we're all sort of in the same arena here, but when you say trickster, what does that mean to you?
They would do things like steal small things, move things from the Wampanoag. And they're kind of still known for that to some degree. The kinds that would make your car start. So, for example, after we got back from Mountain State Park, we were actually cutting the interview in the car because we'd actually gone to two different legends that day. And so we got back to the house, about an hour drive, got back. We were still cutting the interview. We were in the car, in her grandparents' driveway. And things like the lights were flickering in the car. And they were, like little things were being, whipped in front of us and things like that. Like just little nuisance type things, a door constantly being locked that wasn't locked. Like those are the trickster type things that were falling into kind of the more silly as opposed to anything like nefarious.
Right. As opposed to leading you into the woods so that you'll fall or get hurt or lost. Right.
Missing keys is a lot less scary than death, I guess.
Yeah.
Depending where you need to go.
Yes, exactly. Wow, that's fascinating. So you were the pukwudgie guy. Do you have another current kind of obsession that you're following?
It is. By the way, if your listeners go on and actually Google pukwudgie, the vicious, like drooling, long toothed, snarly thing that they're going to see, I have never had that description for a pukwudgie. It's just really cool and sexy, and so it's kind of morphed over the years into this like more of a monster than this kind of like little impish kind of thing. By the way,
it kind of grew with legend, with artistic legend, we could say.
Exactly.
And how do you spell pukwudgie?
PUKWUDIGE.
Oh, see, you have to ask.
There might be
a
an
lot better.
IE, I think it is.
Okay, we'll get it pretty close. I'm a dyslexic, so you cannot imagine what that was going to look like in the show notes.
No,
before.
But if you type PUKW into any kind of search engine, Pukwudgie is going to fill out because there's not many words that have that combination.
You know, it's funny because I had a fairy trouble with something that was called a. It wasn't a pixie. It was called. God, I can't remember now. Puka. I had a puka problem. And that is another one that sort of, you look at the pictures and people sort of went to town with it like they were making a horror movie or something. And actually, there's a horrible movie on Netflix, I think, called Puka, about a big fuzzy puka. But it's funny how you couldn't even find Pukwudgie and now it's everywhere. Like all these little old legends and stuff, I don't know if they're ending up in video games or if people are really researching you, but their popularity is growing.
Well, as a folklorist, I love it because I've been able to sit back and I've been able to watch Pukwudgie become what people want it to become. So, for example, I had people who have contacted me and said, I always thought I had an alien abduction, but now you described the Pukwudgie and some of that stuff, and I feel it's that. Or they've said, I've always wondered why these shadow people and these little and these fireflies were always in my house or in my yard together, and I would see these creepy. And it's that. So it's really kind of changed. And it's funny also having been involved in a little bit of the early media with some of the paranormal shows that have featured it, have totally gotten it wrong intentionally. To be able to watch that and say like, oh, wow, like they just completely changed the legend and people are going with it because it's really cool the way they changed it like that.
You mean they changed it for producer purposes or how the show was going to end?
Exactly. And then, of course, now J.K. Rowling has completely changed the personality of the Pukwudgie to fit kind of how she wants the narrative of that house to behave, and how she wants kind of the story to be. And so, you know, it's funny. I used to have a Google search for Pukwudgie to find out obscure references to it. And now it's just filled with Harry Potter fans and fan art of theirs and kind of discussing like, here's why I'm a Pukwudgie. And so like I said, as a folklorist, I love it. I love to be able to see that kind of change and almost see it in real time to some degree. And sometimes I just wish, a few bucks were kicked my way for it. But what are you going to do?
I know, that's funny because the person that identified what I was talking to as a puka was going by the movie Harvey. And she could not have been more wrong about what that was. Like she was like, oh, that's going to be a nice thing. That's going to give you information like it gave to Jimmy Stewart. And then I learned, don't get your information from Jimmy Stewart movies. He's not good at sourcing his paranormal material.
Yeah, you just can't trust that guy. He's not reliable at all. I have yet to see, the ringing bell when angels get their wings. So.
I know. Damn it. He started that. Now we've all got to have bells around for no reason. That's so funny. So Pukwudgie, that's great. Now I've already learned something here. So what are some other legends or you know what? I actually want to go back a question. When you see the shadow people with that, what do you think that is? The adult in the room kind of thing?
I like the way you described that. I do. I think that it's, and of course, shadow people are a fairly new, and by new, I mean only a decade and a half term that the paranormal community has started to use more for something that has maybe 2 decades now that has existed probably throughout time. Which is, I feel that they are feeding off of the activity somehow. That they are documenting it somehow. Maybe it's really hard to say. I'm not going to go so far as to say, give the colonial or what they call the praying Indians of the Wampanoag this devil term to it because they don't seem to do anything.
Yeah.
And so they seem to be more watching, absorbing what's going on, documenting it. When I first started publishing things on my Massachusetts website, I was doing a lot of interviews with kids because I was working in a juvenile detention facility, and I was interviewing a lot of kids who had been in lockup. And a lot of these lockup buildings they were in were now rumored to be have a lot of paranormal activity, or there's a lot of ghostly activity. Some of them are actually pretty famous, and in the New England area. And so many of these kids, these were hardcore kids. These weren't kids who were in there just, they yelled in school or something. These were, drug dealers and people who had committed violent crimes. And they would say the nighttime was so scary because these shadow people and these lights would appear in their room at night. And these shadow people would just stand there in the corner, sometimes levitate off the air, and watch them. And so it's really, and of course they were potentially living off fear. I mean, it's so hard to tell, and it's so hard to nail down what those kind of things are. But that kind of sucking thing, that kind of like almost psychic vampire that is not solid form, has been recorded all throughout history.
Right. We just gave it the name and probably the hat. I don't know why. Isn't that they usually
right? That's the new thing, right? The hat part.
The hat. Yeah. They've got a nice chapeau. It's funny because in that I would imagine with troubled kids, that's a little bit like an insane asylum where probably a lot of things attach, and there is a lot of fear even of the other kids. So the whole place is probably kind of that a great growing place for that. But I love that idea that they're documenting.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe that's the fringe fan in me of the I can't remember what they're called now. That would be there to record these different moments in history and things like that. I meant the TV show Fringe when I said that. I can't remember what they're called anyway. But yeah, there does seem to be kind of like this recording of these, or this living off of this energy. And of course, Karen, so many of these kind of places, and I've actually now found it in another haunted location here in Florida, these are recycled buildings. So oftentimes when you find a juvenile detention facility, it was either an insane asylum before, or it was a tuberculosis hospital, or it was a tuberculosis hospital that became an institution for mental health disorder, which then became a secure lockup for kids. That pattern is all across the country now. I'm seeing the more I do that kind of research.
That's interesting. I wonder if that is because the building would be set up like a dorm already, or if it just attracts that.
Well, I think the second one's a lot sexier, but it's probably more the first one, because it happens so often. But is there, like I said, the first book I wrote, which was called Dark Woods, kind of explored this idea in a place in Massachusetts. This idea that does darkness find darkness and do the same thing that causes like weird crime or unexplained disappearances and things like that also cause ghosts and things like Pukwudgies or Bigfoot. These locations always tend to kind of be near each other or be with each other. Like, do they feed off each other? A place like the Bridgewater Triangle has the highest concentration of creepy things in the world, and it also has the highest divorce rate in the country. And it also has the highest rate of teen suicide in the country. And it also has the highest rate of accidents on the stretch of road that acts as like its backbone. It's just one of these crazy things, and some of that might be hyperbole now, but it's always up there, and it's definitely in comparison to the places around it higher than those. Do these kinds of places find each other, or is there some kind of opening that just kind of draws in that kind of stuff?
Wow. Well, you know what? Let me take a break really quick, and then I want to hear more about the Bridgewater Triangle and whatever else the heck you're talking about.
Okay.
Who do tarot readers go for tarot readings? They go to Melissa Sonova at melissasonova.com. She gave me the best reading a couple of months ago that is still resonating and helping me out now. She is authentic and to the point. You loved her on the podcast. She is the No BS tarot reader. She also has a tarot class online right now. Check it out. Just watching the promo, you will see how much fun you are going to have while you learn. Also, check out her book, which is always right beside me when I'm doing my readings or my tarot card for me in the morning. It is called Kitchen Table Tarot, and you will love it. Melissa Sonova, that's MELISSACYNOVA. Check her out.
Okay, great. Tell us about the Bridgewater Triangle. That sounds fascinating. I don't even know that part. I left Massachusetts fairly young before I was really into all this, and I was very Western Mass, but I have not heard of the Bridgewater Triangle.
Well, this is quite the rabbit hole, and I'm not even sure we would have enough time to discuss all of it. I will say this, though. If you are interested in anything that I'm saying right now about the Bridgewater Triangle and you have Amazon Prime, you can just type in Bridgewater Triangle documentary. That's actually the name of it. And you can watch a really amazing documentary that took years to make, which features me in it. I'm in it. And other people like Jeff Belanger and Lauren Coleman, but more me. And it's this really interesting look into this from a non-believer's perspective. So it's it just documents these stories. But it's this area in Massachusetts, southeastern Massachusetts, that it has the highest concentration of this stuff. It was discovered or coined, you should probably say, it would probably be a better way to say it, by Lauren Coleman back in the late 70s. And then kind of when he published Mysterious America, it kind of solidified the name Bridgewater Triangle. And it's between the towns of Abington, Freetown, and Rehoboth, which is basically kind of like on the border of Rhode Island. Over the years, because he's a cryptid guy, and was kind of taking these stories of cryptids and kind of analyzing those. It's expanded, and it's kind of like not a triangle so much anymore, but it's not nearly as interesting to call it, the Bridgewater Blob. So Bridgewater Triangle is probably better. But Lizzie Borden, for example, in my definition of the triangle, falls into this. Because Freetown used to include Fall River, which is where Lizzie Borden was accused of killing her parents, and that's probably one of the most famous haunted houses in the country.
Yeah, I've been there a couple times. That's a pretty fascinating place.
And within these borders, anything you want to find, zombies, Bigfoot, the first UFO and Bigfoot sightings in the country came from there. Tons of ghosts, paranormal activity, serial killers, cult activity, which was kind of the focus of my book. Everything in the spectrum of weird happens more often in the Bridgewater Triangle.
So it's kind of like the Skinwalker Ranch.
It is at the Skinwalker Ranch. We're 200 square miles.
Wow. All right. Then we all have to see that on Prime. Bridgewater Triangle documentary. That's pretty fascinating. What would you say, though? I never feel like, other than probably the shock of seeing Bigfoot, I don't know that would be a terrifying thing. Like when you're talking more about like this Pukwudgie, that to me would be more terrifying to see because it's not in my consciousness.
Right. And it's not something that you would expect to. Like, even if you saw a gnome, and if you're the biggest fan of garden gnomes and have them all over your yard, if you saw one of them come alive in the wooded area where you're pretty much all alone, your perspective on gnomes would change very quickly.
Yes, they would. They would not. You'd not have them in your garden much longer.
Right. And so it's although I think if I ran into a Bigfoot, I would be pretty scared. But there is something about the idea of them coming back. None of the people were overly scared when they saw it in its environment. It wasn't that intimidating. It was just more of like, what did I just see? It was the fact that these Pukwudgies then came onto their turf that made it seem scary. So that was the unsettling thing. There's not many stories of waking up and seeing Bigfoot in your living room.
Right. It's kind of more
giving you the evil eye. So I think that's kind of what makes Bigfoot, maybe intimidating more than creepy or frightening.
Yeah, Bigfoot it sounds like a Pukwudgie's like a Tinder date. You're supposed to meet and not really in a neutral place, but not really show up at the person's house. That's
right. And then all of a sudden they're stalking you on Facebook and friend requesting you, and you're like, it was just a swipe. Like,
I know.
You got to.
And they
Natalie and I are always joking that Tripping on Legends, we find a way to slip Tinder into the conversation. And we have yet to get a sponsorship from them.
Oh, that's funny. That the Pukwudgie, and they never use their real name on their profile, so it's hard.
Right, and there's always two guys backing them up. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
And I know you must know my favorite is Mothman.
Yes.
And there endless Mothman. Any Mothman sightings in the Bridgewater Triangle?
No, there have been pterodactyl type things, but nothing that really fits what Mothman is or the way that it's described.
That's interesting that you said pterodactyl, because I just recently, there's a really great little YouTube channel called Slapped Ham. I don't know why it's called that, but it's a guy, and he goes over, these are the top 10 creepy photos, or the top 10 this or that. And they did have, although it's the internet, so it could be anything, they had somebody that filmed something that looked like a pterodactyl, and it was pretty far away, but it was just clear enough that you thought, what is that? And also, wasn't when I was doing my research on the Mothman, there was another in France or something. They blew up a mine or something, and a pterodactyl kind of walked out. So pterodactyl's not really an uncommon sighting, is it?
No, and it's kind of connected to the Thunderbird as well. And so, I guess maybe one man's Thunderbird is another man's pterodactyl, depending on how you look at it. And so, there's definitely been reports of it. Like it's not a new phenomenon, and it's actually pretty common. I remember, some of the first paranormal books I got talking about those types of winged creatures, both a hairy and a hairless almost one, in the Midwest quite a bit.
Wow. What's your theory on Mothman?
Wow.
I know that's a tough question, but I have a friend that insists it's an owl. And I'm like, no, because those people in Point Pleasant, if anybody would know an owl or a crane, those are the people that would know that.
And it's funny, like, owls became the biggest paranormal explanation a couple years ago, and they've started like everything. It's like, it's a pukwudgie. No, it's an owl. It's, well, okay, there's a lot of owls I guess we don't know of, then maybe. It's one of those cases that I think it probably falls into some kind of interdimensional being, and I really do think that. I'm a big fan of comics, and so I'm a big fan of like the Silver Surfer and kind of like the hearkening of something coming and things like that. And these things that we don't know, which have interdimensional kind of abilities, or might just be that, they're allowed to poke their head in every once in a while. And I think the fact that there haven't been a crazy amount of things that are exactly like the Mothman. Although the Midwest and Chicago have been having a lot of them in the last couple of years. Yes,
like he's made a reappearance there or something.
Right. The whole idea of the weirdness that was going on in that area, and this seemed to be not centered around the Mothman, but rather the Mothman seemed to be there to tell that it was coming. That's the part of it that's kind of intriguing to me. And so I really do think it's some kind of messenger, or maybe once again like a recorder of some kind.
Yeah, or something. I always think the whole Point Pleasant thing was that something poked a hole there. Something poked a hole through a dimension, because plus I know it probably is a comic. I don't read a lot of comics, but I'm sure the whole radioactive area probably makes that even a better tale. But when they had the UFO guys and the who was the guy that came through that was talking? I can't remember. Indrid Cole.
Yeah.
All those just seem like they did not seem connected at all, which I feel like makes that story even more credible.
Have you seen Hellier yet? The documentary Hellier?
I loved it. Carl.
Okay, me too.
Carl was on before that came out, so he was saying he couldn't talk about it. But I'm going to have Carl or some of those cast members on soon, because I thought it was great. What do you think they were chasing?
I think they were chasing pukwudgies personally.
I was going to ask you that in the beginning, and I was like, I'm going to.
I do, and I heard. Are you familiar with Spooky South Coast out of Massachusetts with Tim Weisberg? And
no, is that another podcast?
I thought that I had booked you to be on that show years ago when I was doing their booking, but I guess not.
No, I'll listen now though.
And years ago, I mean, probably 2 or 3 years ago now, Tenny had come on and given his story about essentially what sounded to me like a Michigan pukwudgie. And as I'm watching Hellier, and as I'm trying to get Natalie to watch it, but she's falling asleep, and I'm like, this is a puckwudgie. This is a puck. I'm like, this also reminds me of the Teddy one. And then they called Tenny about it. I was like, oh no. But I really honestly feel, and like I said, with puckwudgie being this blanket term, I think it's easy to say that a goblin would fall into what a puckwudgie is, but it had all of the trappings of what a puckwudgie might be. And we actually did an episode. We try to put out an episode a week or a live show a week. And one of the live shows we did, because I don't think you can fully appreciate the document, I don't think you can appreciate Hellier completely unless you've experienced the paranormal and you start to see these weird connections happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so Tripping on Legends put out a live show that we called, the ghostly synchronicity. Because the more that you get into this stuff, the more all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, bird. There was a bird right over there, and now there's a bird. And and I don't think there's a spoilers to say like the whole can incident. If you've never experienced that, if you've never been caught in the whirlwind of the paranormal and the supernatural, that can incident doesn't seem like it's all that important, or you go like, yeah, no. If you've lived that life and that kind of stuff has happened to you, you totally see just how profound that episode is.
Yeah, those synchronicities.
Exactly. And how, whether it's a warning sometimes or whether it's you're on the right path, keep going. The more you get into this, the more you see it. And as a folklorist, you take a step back and you say, okay, but is this just like, archetypes? Is it, like, are these stories the same? Or do these stories seem to be connected because we keep retelling the same ghost story and over again, trying to figure it out? Or is it that there's something that's drawing us to like a bigger part of the story, or drawing us to a place that's going to kind of have some kind of weird key for us that's going to make things fall into place? It's the kind of fun part of the paranormal that to me seems a lot more fun than just kind of being in a haunted house. It's asking these kind of questions and then watching those signs. Like our tagline kind of is follow the signs. And that's kind of been our mantra for the 3 years we've been doing this.
And where can everybody find this?
You can subscribe to the show on iTunes or Google Play, wherever you get it. It's called Tripping on Legends.
And you're using a G at the end, right? Tripping?
Yes. I know it's my accent coming out a little bit going, Tripping on Legends, yo. No, it's Tripping on Legends. The best place you can follow us is actually on Facebook because it's the easiest to say. And it says facebook.com/trippingonlegends. Our website is trippingonlegends.wordpress.com because we have no money or time to establish one. So it's much more of a blog. But literally, if you go online and you just type in Christopher Balzano, ghost, there ain't many people named Balzano out there doing this. And so
no, Balzano Rontowski. I think we've got the market on those domain names.
Yes, definitely.
All right. So, and in the last few minutes, and also, would you like if any of our listeners have legends to email them to you?
Definitely. We're doing something called the Legends Project, and part of that is haunted love. So we hashtag things haunted love. If you have a legend in your area, or if you have kind of like a ghostly story that has a backstory to it, we would love it if you could send it to us. We're also at spookytripping@gmail.com. But if you have a story that somehow involves love, whether it's like two lovers who can't be together, who commit suicide, who are now stuck in the afterlife, constantly playing it out, or it's a mother who gave something up, or it's a man who couldn't, anything that kind of revolves around love, we're working on a whole big project called Haunted Love that we would love to get stories on.
Awesome. Okay. And I want to go because I lost the plug for my Zoom recorder. So this always happens. We're right at the end. I have like 1% battery on my recorder. Tell me the best, if you can, this is sort of, I'm throwing this out of nowhere, the best bylines or storylines. Like, I heard about a guy that, married a duck and then was haunted by a big rooster, or what, give us some good ones to look for. And maybe even in areas like what? Tell me about Muncie.
I probably don't have time to get into that. That's actually a haunted love story, but it's the same kind of thing, but it involves the railroad that goes through Muncie. and these teenagers who were challenging each other, this couple that were challenging each other. And he eventually said, like, I love you so much, I'm going to stay here till you say you love me. And she thought it was a joke, and he got hit by the train.
Oh.
And supposedly in this one section of Muncie, when the train comes through, people have seen him on the track. They've heard like music playing in the train itself, things like that. So it's kind of, that's the very, very quick version of it, but it's a great, suicide, death, love story, Midwest kind of good feel to it.
Okay, I'll see if I can do a Paranormal Karen there. Trains are hard though. It's kind of like I just did one on the Luxor, and it's a little bit suicide-y, so you have to kind of find the joke working around that sort of topic. Okay, how about the most obscure or strange?
The most obscure strange. We have a great suicide tree here called the Fairfield Oak. And supposedly if you go, there's so many people have either died or committed suicide near it that if you go there, especially on the weekends, especially like on an early Sunday, you'll be overwhelmed with the desire to commit suicide. And so, of course, we went there ourselves and we doubled down on it, and we played Gloomy Sunday, which is known as the suicide song.
I didn't know suicide had a song.
Oh yeah! Now you people are gonna have to look up "Gloomy Sunday." It's a song notorious. It's actually banned in some countries because people have committed suicide in droves while listening to it.
Wow.
So we doubled down and we went to the Fairfield Oak and did it. We've got a great one that could be a show in and of itself called "The Devil's Tree," where supposedly a serial killer named John Gerald Schaefer. John Gerald Schaefer hung two of his victims from. And this is now probably one of the most notorious haunted places in all of Florida. But people are just going to have to listen to that episode if they want to hear the full story of that.
That's right. That sounds like the movie Sinister.
Leave them wanting more. Exactly.
Yes. Wow. And that was great because you actually put a song legend in the legend, or a song lore into the lore that you gave me. That was fantastic.
That's the kind of thing we do. Like we went to a World War II. Florida actually was the training site for British pilots during World War II because they couldn't train in Britain because, those Germans were in the air. And so they brought them to Florida and they were training here, and 21 of them died. And then their commander came back after he died and was buried with them, died in training. And we went there and we played sad World War II songs to see if we could spark these things, and read, old war, British war poems to see if we could spark some. So that's the kind of thing that we do when we go tripping on legends. And the best part of that story is, and I know you'll appreciate it, all reports say that the fighters that came down to train in Florida from England were some of the worst pilots the country has ever created, because the men got here, and because of the how much orange juice and easy women they were able to have, they couldn't concentrate on fighting.
That's so. See, there's something wrong with Florida. I'm telling you.
There is. It corrupts even the most gentle of soul.
It does. Oh, Christopher, thank you so much. We have been trying to set this up forever, and it was so worth the wait. All right, wonderful, everybody. That is Tripping on Legends. Look that up. I'm going to have a link to it in the notes. Thank you, Christopher. I hope you survive Florida.
Thank you very much, Karen.
As much as possible. And everybody, I will be in Muncie, Indiana on April 5th. You can see me in Chicago and St. Charles in June. That's all the dates I have so far. Thanks, everybody. And if you can leave me 5 stars, that would be great. Leave it for Tripping on Legends also. And we'll see you next week.